Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have now the pleasure to listen to our colleague and friend David Gardner. David is the CEO of the Royal Agricultural Society of England and Innovation for Agriculture. Innovation for Agriculture is a consortium of 15 agriculture societies that use their network for knowledge transfer. The organization is less than 3 years old, very young, and has 3 current work streams. One on precision livestock farming, that some of us are familiar with. One on soils, some of us are familiar with. And one on antibiotic resistance. Some of them are confident on that clearly. Prior to joining the RASE in 2012, he managed farms for a large corporate farming business in the UK. My experiences, he says, included dairy cows, beef, sheep, cereals, oilseed rape, and fruit crops. In 2009, he did a Nuffield scholarship to study new technologies to transform UK farms. Very topical. I traveled, he said, to US, New Zealand, Australia, or English-speaking countries, but one which is not Japan, visiting research institutes and universities. He is also a non-executive director of the 5,000 hectare farming business in Norfolk, growing onions, potatoes, sugar beet, wheat, and rapeseed. David, you have a total of 20 minutes, and we're happy to listen to you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Michelle, and thank you for inviting me to talk today about this project. And the reason I wanted to talk about this project was because it was the UEAA that gave birth to this project. Without the UEAA, this project would not have happened. And when I first joined the RASE, I identified Horizon 2020 as a potential source of funding for project work, but I knew nobody in Europe. And then one day, Kirsten contacted me and wanted to meet up. And we met. I went down to London to meet Kirsten in the Farmers Club, and she wanted to talk to me about UEAA membership. Historically, the RASE had been members and had dropped its membership when it went through a difficult period. And during the course of that meeting, I don't know if you remember, but you handed me a piece of paper with a contact email address for every country in Europe. And I went home and I wrote an email to everybody saying we would like to put a European project together. If you're interested, please contact me. And some of you did. And that formed the basis of the consortium that eventually pursued first actually a different project. We pursued one project in 2015. That was, I have a very good bid writer. I've been quite lucky, I've got a good bid writer in the UK. And that was put on the reserve list, but we didn't win a project. But people were encouraged to come back and have another go. And we put together this project, which was more focused. And we were successful. And in early November last year, we were notified that we had been successful. And the project actually started on the 1st of March 2016. So we've been going about 6 months. It's a 3-year project. It's part of the Horizon 2020 program, which I'm sure all of you here are familiar with. And it's to create a thematic network, a network of practitioners, farmers, scientists across Europe, specifically around sensor technologies and dairy cows. Just quickly in terms of innovation for agriculture, Michelle briefly introduced us. We are a consortium, we're a separate organisation, we're a separate charity, and we're a consortium of 15 agricultural societies in England, I think our oldest member goes back to 1798, but looking on the walls here, I think we're quite a young organisation in comparison with the French Academy. And the Royal Agricultural Society is one of those institutions. Okay, we've heard a little bit of talk as we have gone through today about some of the challenges that are facing farmers. And I've just got 2 or 3 slides to look at that really, but we see farmers becoming bigger, livestock numbers are increasing on most farms, margins are getting lower, there's less time available to deal with animals, and welfare and performance increasingly are major issues for farmers to address. We've already heard today about the challenges of farmers actually losing money, and there's a graph here that very ably shows that really, that in the latter part of 2014, the milk price in blue dropped into a situation where the farm was losing money. And dairy farms across Europe really have had a very, very difficult time. In the UK, we're losing dairy farmers every week. It's been an extremely difficult environment for farmers to operate in. Oh, I'm struggling with the technology. Yeah. So farmers face a whole host of challenges. Most of all, perhaps profitability, but animal welfare, the environmental demands, the consumer demands, issues associated with labour, with the quality of what they do, economic competition, particularly as we are opened up to globalisation, water, legislation, succession. There's a whole host of challenges that farmers are facing, and the technologies associated with sensor technologies offer an opportunity for farmers to improve their performance, improve their welfare. I just want to touch on what 1 or 2 of those technologies are for those of you who are not familiar. The cow here is wearing a collar, and you can see a blue sort of pendant hanging from her neck, and inside the collar there is an accelerometer. For those of you who have a Fitbit, which monitors your activity, it's the same technology. It monitors the cow's movements, and they are used to establish when a cow is in heat, when she's in estrus. They record the fact that she's more restless, that she moves around more, that she rides on the back of other cows. And that's the sort of technology that we're starting to use. Small, tiny electronic sensors that can pick up information about cows. Some of these collars have small microphones in them, and they hear every time the cow regurgitates her cud. When she brings her cud back up from her stomach into her mouth, they hear that and they register that she's cudding regularly and that she's in good health. And if they stop hearing that, they know that the cow is sick. So that's one form of technology. We can also, if those of you who don't work in livestock, if you can remember back to your biology at school, a cow has 4 stomachs. In the second stomach, if we put a heavy object into the cow, it will settle in the second stomach. And we can use boluses that sit there, and they can record the cow's temperature and relay that back constantly to the office. They can record the pH in the rumen and record and send that constantly back to the office. And again, they will signal that the cow is unwell, that she's not feeling great, and the farmer can change his management accordingly. And then finally, just as a way of example, this is not a comprehensive list of all the technologies, it's just some of them. We can use some thermal cameras to pick up when quite literally the animal is hot, when she's running a fever. And here you see that it's picking up part of the cow's udder is running hot. We can use exactly the same technology to pick up that she has hot spots in her feet. And we can use this technology to understand when the animal is feeling unwell. So the project is centered around these technologies, and its purpose really is to promote those technologies to farmers, to generate conversations across Europe which will encourage farmers to adopt these technologies, but also generate conversations between farmers and scientists so that the development of these technologies will be quicker. and scientists can get feedback from farmers, scientists can talk to scientists, and they can speed up the development of future technology. It's very much addressing what we call the research pipeline, the concept of basic research being put into applied research, and extension and advice taking it down to the farmer. And certainly in the UK, that pipeline is badly broken. It doesn't work very well, and we're trying to re-establish that pipeline and get feedback running back to the, both from the scientific community, but also back to the scientific community. So our partners in the project, we have a number of farming partners, farming organisations, including our colleagues from Sweden, Dutch colleagues, Belgian colleagues as well. We also have academic partners. The Estonians and Latvians also joined the partnership as a result of UEAA, but partners from right across Europe, including Spain, Romania, and again the Low Countries. And then finally, commercial partners. And many of you will appreciate that a good European bid is associated with bringing together farming organisations, research institutes and commercial partners, and we feel we have a good mix of that within the project. In terms of what we have to deliver, the heart of the project, which I'll talk about a little bit more, is a community of practice, which is really a sort of talking shop, exchanging ideas. But we also have to produce 10 best practice guides, 10 videos and 10 infographics, and also 10 standard operating procedures. And we're actually setting up, I think 10, maybe 11, what we call special interest groups, which will be focused around particular technologies. So there will be one on udder health, there'll be one on hoof health, there'll be one on digestive disorders, there's a whole host of them. And these themes will be built around those. We're going to put a lot of stuff online in what we call a virtual warehouse of dairy sensors. We've also got to feed back to the Commission in terms of the future research and innovation needs of this particular sector, and we're going to run a limited number of events. We're going to hold 20 on-farm events and 20 workshops, which sounds like quite a lot, but when you split it across 9 European countries, it's actually very little in each country. So the community of practice really is a talking shop. The core of it is a web portal. Ilvo in Belgium are hosting that. Into that we will feed existing research, stuff from the commercial businesses, feedback from a variety of partners, but we will build into that forums where people can talk online. So potentially a farmer in Spain can put a question up online and say, well, I'm using the dealer valve heat detection system, I've got a problem with it, and maybe it would be a farmer in Estonia who will come up with the answer to that and say, well, I had exactly the same problem and this is how I solved it, or maybe suggest to dealer valve themselves how they might improve the product and change it. Sticking with the community of practice, as I said earlier, we're going to set up a number of special interest groups. We have just decided what they will be. I think we have 11 of them. The community of practice will be both online, and clearly the online is the core of the whole community, but also we need to get out and talk to farmers, and we're finding already it's the countries where we have talked to farmers most, where we are seeing they're signing up to the website. In terms of what it'll benefit, we're really learning from shared experiences, a comprehensive source of knowledge that's kept up to date. Farmers really making better returns on their investments, trying to close that gap that we saw earlier in terms of the profitability, helping researchers identify real problems, improve decision making on the farm, and hopefully improving the quality of life for both farmers and animals, and it costs nothing to join. That's the website, www.4D4F, data-driven dairy decisions for farmers. Go online, please join up, watch us as we grow. I was saying to Carl Anders when we had the break, where we're up to with this project, we are learning how to run thematic networks and what makes them good and so on as we go along. And really our target now is to get 3 of these special interest groups ready to give a push to sometime late this year, early next year, and then have a mass sort of online Twitter, Facebook, web-based drive to get people talking and probably actually artificially generate the first conversations and get people involved. And the key really is to get enough people talking that it then starts to generate its own traffic. And if we achieve that, I will feel that really we have delivered what the whole project was all about. But I'd like to thank those of you who've participated with us. We are still pursuing further European funding despite all the uncertainties created by Brexit. And some of you are involved in those projects as we put them together at the moment. We're not going to lead those projects. Actually, ZLTO, our Dutch partners, are going to lead them because we feel that there's likely to be a prejudice in the Commission against. But we have had a guarantee from our own government that anything that is signed up until Brexit actually happens will be honoured. And we hope that beyond Brexit, the UK government will sign up to the European Science Programme and will still be part of Horizon 2020. But at the moment, that's just part of the uncertain world that us Brits live in. So that's what the project's all about. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. This paper is now open for discussion. I think there are a lot of questions that are highly raised from the very original initiatives, I say. So who wants the floor? Yes, Lisa, stand up please, and the microphone from Nick is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation of this exciting and I think very necessary project. It's a very good thing this type to be started. What I would like you to say a few words about is the quality control of all the members, you know, discussing in these web pages. Who is sort of doing the quality control there? Have you had any thoughts about that?
Right, that's a really good question. And we have spent some time thinking and talking about that ourselves. I actually know somebody in the UK who runs a farming forum. And he's been running it 4 or 5 years. He has had 2 million posts on it, which is extraordinary. He's only had 300 or 400 that he's had to moderate, which again I think is extraordinary. He says it largely moderates itself. If somebody puts up something that is inappropriate, other people will tell them to take it down, which I think again is quite interesting, but they do check it. They do make sure it's okay. We have a system whereby people who want to sign up actually have to sign into the special interest groups. And I understand that will stop the automated sales pitch for Viagra and so on coming through onto the site that you would otherwise get. And it stops a lot of the nuisance stuff that would otherwise tumble onto the site. But to be frank, that's something we've still got to learn, is how much trouble we get with stuff that is inappropriate, that shouldn't be there. As we kick off, we will watch it very, very closely, and we'll either learn how to deal with it or gain confidence that it isn't really a problem.
Thank you. Any other question? Yes. A friend from the Slovak Republic, I forgot it. The President Stefan, is it? Stefan. Hold on for the microphone. Yes, please.
Thank you for a very nice presentation, and I will be very happy to read a lot from website, of course. Was there anything also done from the systematic point of view? Because pharma is needed to get a complete system, not only the sensors or other things.
In terms of the whole farm system?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
I mean, the project's very much focused on farmers making better decisions using data. So it doesn't really look directly at the whole farm system, but increasingly that they relate to the way the whole farm works. And of course, one of the most complex areas of data collection and so on is the robotic milker itself, and automated milking. And and of course that impacts on the whole farm system, but by definition, it impacts through on the way the whole farm works. I do think increasingly, as these sensor-based systems come together, they will sort of fall around the whole way of running the farm. And indeed, one of the issues with them at the moment is they tend to be separate pieces of equipment where they don't all talk to each other. And farmers complain about that. So you have one system for identifying heat, another one for identifying lame cows. Some of the really big companies like De La Val are tying that together, the very big companies. But the project itself doesn't look at sort of holistic farming systems, although it does have a close tie-in to it. Does that sort of answer your question? Yeah.
Merci. Any other question? The back first, the back before. So you got back with, please.
Are the 10 practice guides considered complementary or competitors?
Well, they will touch separate subject areas, but no, they will be complementary. So that they'll, I can't remember exactly what all 10 are. I should have written them down on a little note. But one of them I know is just on straightforward data management. And so that covers all the other subjects as well. We felt that there were 3 or 4 areas that were common problems for all dairy farmers, really. And they were sort of heat detection, mastitis control, lameness, and digestion. But what's quite interesting is some of these sensors will identify more than just one of those problems. So a heat detection collar, which effectively monitors the cow's movement, will also pick up if the cow is sick or if she's lame. The cow stops moving about as much if her feet hurt, and if she feels unwell, she'll stop moving about as much. So the heat detection collar will pick up more than heat. It will pick up other aspects of cow management. So there is a big crossover between the different areas that the special interest groups will look at.
Merci. Merci. Eva, you have the floor now.
Thank you so much. And I have a question, but I want to stress one thing, that it's really, this really is the benefit of our union. It's really the result of our union. And that's, I want to ask the colleagues, maybe we can push also efforts more to this direction, common projects. And when we are writing the project, then to remember also others union, our union colleagues, other academies, and to keep this network, not only just to come here for the nice meeting, but keep also in the real life. And that's, of course, we need more Davids who are active and writing, and but this is really possible that when we are building the consortiums that use these knowledges that are here, these countries that are in our union. And that will be a real result. This is the result of our common being together. Maybe we can put on these activities also to work more with the networks and, yeah. Good. Okay. Thank you.
So that we forget. So we have to consider that as a possible activity to try to. Now I was joking. Should I make that joke? Do we want some David's clones?
I don't think my mother would.
Okay, thanks, everybody. That's a good point. Thank you. Any other question? I have one technical one, and I'm sorry I was busy with my colleague here, so maybe I'm not listening to everything. I saw a slide on mastitis. Now, of course, you remember that I'm a veterinarian by training, and first year's practice, mastitis was a big issue. You're saying that when there was some fever, you have that other being special color, but of course you have some mastitis with fever, but you also have, and more often, the studies without any flavor, would that be picked up?
It won't necessarily pick everything up, and I think one of the things that's quite interesting about these technologies is they will develop, I think, to the point where particularly the high-yielding cow in the future will probably carry 3 or 4 sensors, and they'll work together. So what one sensor might be saying, this isn't waving a red flag, and all the sensors might be individually saying, this isn't waving a red flag, but when you put the messages from all 4 together, it says this is a red flag. And I think progressively we will move towards sensors where we have a number of sensors all feeding back into the system where there are complex algorithms working together to analyze that data and come up with what's wrong.
Could we say that the approach is more kind of a holistic approach rather than a specific case by case or
I think that's what it will develop into. And in time, in time that we will see, and we're already seeing it with the really big, the sort of GEAs and the dealer valves and so on, we'll develop whole management packages using a variety of sensors. So I haven't shown them today, but there are sensors like that will condition score cows every single time they go past the cameras. They will condition score cows, and we'll have information coming through all the time in a real-time basis that will allow us to manage the herd much better.
Any other questions? So before we thank you, David, you agreed to have your slides be posted.
Yeah, it's fine.
You did answer, but I want to make sure all
Yep.
that you agree. Okay.
And the video, we're a film star.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, as I said, Maria Pais from Portugal is not with us, unfortunately. So Agnes will again present her problem, I'm not sure it's a problem anyway, a point in a more scientific approach now, so that you better understand what's the science behind the regulatory problem, because it's not difficult in terms of regulation, but at least it's a good idea that we have a better understanding and knowledge of what's behind in terms of science.
So I would like to present you the French opinion on the regulation of targeted mutagenesis in plant breeding. So you can see on this slide the new press release, but I would like to present you the scientific opinion with its appendix. They are coming from a discussion of 2 working groups of 2 academies of France, the Academy of Agriculture and the Academy of Technology. So more than 40 members of both academies were working since January on this scientific opinion. So what is important to say in scientific world is to remember that since the early 90s, the techniques of induced mutagenesis targeted by biotech processes have been developed. They involve meganuclease, oligonucleotide-directed mutagenesis, zinc finger nuclease, and the talon nuclease. And the new ones are the CRISPR system associated with a nuclease. So, as you know, spontaneous mutation naturally occur in the environment since the beginning of the living organisms in the earth. They are source of genetic diversity. They have been used in agriculture to identify species and varieties to fit to human needs. This spontaneous mutation have major consequences in agriculture. because you can use them to control very major traits in food production. Just to give an example, the control of the addition of rice grains to the panicle. Another example is the gene which controls the 2-row barley turning into 6-row barley, called the winter barley, was done by a spontaneous mutation. In the early 90s, we have developed this nucleus, but before, in the beginning of the 70s, breeders sought to increase the genetic diversity using physical treatments as gamma rays or X-ray also. And later, they use chemical treatment. This random mutation was also used in agriculture. They are really interesting because today we can cultivate more than 3,000 species which this induce but randomly mutation. And for example, 200 varieties of rice are still cultivated in the world, including in organic culture, but also sunflower, yams, many fruits and ornamental plants were and are still created by this random mutation. Today we have new breeding techniques, the so-called genome editing tools. They are due to two advanced techniques. The genome sequencing, which starts in the 18th or the last century, which can precisely identify the nucleotide sequences of genes in the genome, in the DNA molecule, and the discovery of the Scissor, the DNA nucleus. We cut the DNA at a specific location. The discovery of this Scissor is derived from an enzyme which has been called meganuclease, which was identified by a French team, by Bernard Dujon in 1992 at the Pasteur Institute. More recently, in 2012, the CRISPR techniques are getting better control than the other technique I mentioned previously, and the risk of off-target mutation is becoming very low, extremely low, even zero. And in plants, they are considered as new tools to created new mutation by changing a single nucleotide without to add any new foreign DNA in the genome. So this technique allows the creation when the genome sequence of the plants is known, a new mutation at the same site of a gene, which can control an identified trait. So we decided in two working groups to write this French opinion with different parts, a part with explanatory memorandum, as you can see in this slide. Then an appendix which can explain the different mutation, the spontaneous mutation, the random mutation induction, as I mentioned, and the induced mutation led by a biotech process. So our analysis was summarized in this slide. So we consider, from the perspective of both French academies, Académie d'agriculture et Académie des technologies, techniques of targeted mutagenesis can, in principle, be excluded from the techniques regulated by the European Directive on the deliberate release of genetically modified organisms into the environment. So I show you the press release you can find on the OEAA website and also in Academy of Agriculture and Academy of Technology websites. Thank you very much for your attention.
Merci Agnès. Agnès will be again on the stage tomorrow. She will give another presentation which will be wider. But I thought it was appropriate today, as we had a little bit of time, that she presents more scientifically than she did earlier on this afternoon. Topic. This paper is now open for discussion. Any question? Yes. Thomas.
It's not a question, it's an opinion. I'm completely ignorant on the topic. It's one of the many issues where I'm completely out of scope, but I'm not ignorant about the European Commission. And I think if I can easily understand that there is evidence science-based that we should not treat mutagenesis as the classic GMO. But I think it would be a mistake if we defend to treat mutagenesis as the classic breeding techniques. And it's a new issue, and I'm sure our politicians will be afraid. And if they are only to choose between more or nothing and everything, they will choose everything, just in order to be sure and so on. Is it not possible to think about some intermediary way which ensure politicians that there is some additional control as compared to the classic techniques which are involved in order to allow the issue to go on? If not, clearly they have to choose between nothing and the precaution principle applied in its purity. They will choose the purity.
Thanks, Thomas. Before you respond, now you talked about the Commission, not talking about Parliament. And the Parliament could be even worse. So it's a good point. Thank you. What would you like to respond to that?
Yes, thank you very much for your remark. It's an important remark. This discussion is still open at the European level since 7 years now. A working group was starting to discuss on the regulation of this new targeted mutagenesis, but we are still no news.
Within the EU?
Yes, 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 in Brussels. But we have still no news, and we are expecting a new regulation on that. The big difference between the spontaneous and random mutation with the new the new technique of mutation, they are more precise, they are targeted and not randomly inducing a change in the genome. So in terms of biosafety, it's more accurate. What we can propose also in next discussion is probably to regulate on phenotype on the product from this new technology instead on the technique, on the process itself.
So strategically, would you agree with Thomas, or would you not agree with him and say, well, we better make sure that it's a no mutation, and so that there is a yes or no answer, and usually it's a no answer? Anybody else wants to participate in that discussion? It's very important, as you all realize, of course. No other? Yes? Jean-Paul Lamy of the French Academy. You have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Two things. One is the reaction to that would be from those whom we know would be the big business is living through the door and getting back through the window. This might be the reaction to that new announcement. My second point will be, may look cosmetic, but I think it's not that cosmetic, it is semantic. I think coming from academies, the word opinion should not be used. I think you better say viewpoint or position, but not opinion. It is too subjective as a term.
Okay.
Very good point. Now, the first part of Jean-Paul's presentation, do you have any comment on that? Yes, Lisa, we will deal with the second point, but first point first.
No, this is just the point because this is a discussion that we are having since a long time back. And I think that it's strengthening the proposal that David had for what should be discussed at the meeting, according to what we would say in Brussels, that we need a science-based base for political decisions. And I think it's a pity if we have all the time to try to go around things and not see what they are and call them for the right names. We have so many things happening in biotechnology today, and we are still far away from this. We have the CRISP today, and what will we do with that? And lots of things are happening. So I think it's a sad situation, but it is the way it is. But I think what we can do as academies is to underpin the opinion that science must be used much more by the politicians, and they should not be so afraid of science.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you.
Thank you. Oh, is that working now? Oh. Yeah, that's it. You all realize that we are video at the moment, so anybody from the world can listen to what we're saying and watching what we're doing. So it's important that the points that have been maybe would be heard in Brussels. I don't know, but it's good. Anyway, so thank you very much. Now, the second point that Jean-Paul has made is excellent in terms. We have here at the Academy of Agriculture of France put the word opinion. Would you be ready to change that word in shifting on to position? What does the native English speaking persons in the room think about that? Position is as English as?
No, position I would suggest is
No.
position I would suggest is further than an opinion. Whereas viewpoint I would say is the same as an opinion. So you're trying to state this as a point of fact rather than something to be discussed, if you like. Again, coming back to science-based as opposed to value-based. Opinion to some extent implies an element of value-based, in my view.
Well, you're probably the only native English-speaking person. So if you think that it's better for an academy to keep the word opinion,
no, I would use the word position.
Oh, you would?
Yeah,
Sorry.
I'd use the word position rather than opinion.
Which is stronger after elaboration and
Position to me would imply that this is what we believe that is factual. Whereas opinion is very much, this is what I think.
philosophy.
And almost if you're putting forward an opinion, you are inviting someone else to challenge that.
Okay, so are we ready to change that word to position? You agree? You would agree, yes?
I should check with my collaborators from the Academy of Agriculture and Academy of Technology. We choose opinion because it's a French translation of the French word avis. And avis is kind of subjective word also, and it bears a lot of values also. And there is a lot of scientific opinions which were released on this issue also. So, okay, I will discuss with my colleagues.
Yes. The UAA and its General Assembly can't make the decision it wishes without asking the academies themselves what they think. What we cannot say is that the first line opinion adopted by the Academy of Agriculture, that we cannot change. But we can change the title, because that is the UAA position.
Okay.
So I would suggest that we would position of the regulation of targeted mutagenesis in plant breeding and leave the opinion that not adopted would be what follows, because that is, the opinion is adopted by the two French academies, but UAA may use the word position if we decide so. So,
Position.
does the group here, we are sitting in the General Assembly, so we have the power to do that. Do we agree in putting just the title, we don't change what it doesn't belong to us, and that's the position of the opinions of the French Academies, but do we agree on putting the word position instead of opinion?
Yes.
Who is against? Abstention? One abstention. You were right in the minutes. Okay, well,
This is
do
my-
you want to make a comment on your abstention?
Okay, I agree.
Unfortunately, Europe already lost the battle on the GMO compared to the American or Canadian scientists. Our problem is that the European Union is not open for innovation in agriculture. 33 years ago, two eminent groups in the US and in Europe developed the transgenic plant in '83. And what happened during the last 33 years? In the US, they used the technology with great success. Europe is just producing paragraph and not using the innovation. Now, when the situation is exactly the same, an American scientist, Jennifer Doudna in Berkeley, and here in Europe, Emmanuel Charpentier, developed the CRISPR-Cas system for the agriculture use, which is an absolutely perfect precision breeding technique, not only in plant, in animals too.
Absolutely.
And of course, with microbes, especially microbes.
Right.
So I'm a little bit afraid that we repeat the history if we are not giving scientific basis for changing the regulation. In Europe, the regulation is based on the process and not on the trade, like in Canada. Because in Canada or in the US, they study the end product on environmental and health point of view, and not how they made it. And if we are not boosting the innovation in Europe, definitively, not only the US, however, Southeast Asia, China, Japan, and South Korea will take the lead in the innovation of the agriculture, as it already we can see in the literature. So this is why I think this opinion, I'm not let's say, I'm not like the semantics, but I think opinion is a correct word. But of course, this is pressed by the two academies, so I don't think so that we have the right to change this title. Thank you.
And your first name is Guran, right? Your first name is Guran.
Erwin. Erwin. From
Sorry,
Hungary.
I'm sorry. I'm just trying to write it for you, so you got it right. To answer your point, I don't see the problem in, well, so far we all agree, except you, who abstains, but I think position is the responsibility of the UAA. If we all agree like it seems, that's fine. Of course, we have to leave opinion for the French Academies, because we do not have any right on that. That is their position. So it's an opinion fine, but we can put that in the title position. So again, I asked for who were against, no one. Who is abstains? We have one, okay? And who is for? Raise your hand so that we make sure and we'll agree. You raise your hands if you agree with me on the one is position. Good, okay? So one abstention and everybody is for it. I think we've covered it. Any other questions, Hussein? No more questions, so you will put the word position, and we will put that on the, you will post that on the website. Right?
Okay, thank you.
You got it, so it's over in that abstain.
Yes,
Put that in the minutes,
yes.
please. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you all, and now the floor is yours. So, incidentally, I forgot to mention that this summary is page 32 in the abstract book that we have, and William's paper is page 38 of the abstract book. And before I move ahead, I have to find my piece of paper with the introduction of the speakers, which I have lost right now. Where is it? Right here. Professor William Podolsky has been working 10 years in the Forestry and Game Research Institute in Jíloviště, Stratendy. Last 20 years at the Faculty of Forestry and Wood Sciences of Czech University of Life Sciences at Agricultural University in France. He's lecturing forest ecology and silviculture issues. He's the head of the silviculture department. He was working as vice dean for science and research, and for 3 periods as dean of the faculty. His main research object is the forest soil science, humus forms, and introduced 3 species especially. Congratulations. He is the current president, no, is now the new past president. Oh, sorry. He's the current president of the Czech Academy of Agriculture for still some month, and young past president of the UA. Thank you, William. You have the floor for 20 minutes.
Thank you, Michel, for presentation. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the reason why I did present this presentation, this theme, is very simple. Because in our country we can feel big danger on for the forestry from the current situation. The climatic change is widely discussed in the society, in many sectors, in the policy, in the environmental policies, and the result is very often very simple. The foresters are not able to manage their forest. They should be replaced by some ecologists or some other specialists, and their role is very simple, to produce the wood, nothing more. But many of us, we don't agree with this future of forestry. We would like to show that the future of forestry could be much more interesting, not only to be a supplier of timber. So the danger was the reason why I am preparing this show, and I would like to present you some things and some, let's say, ideas for thinkings. The first question could be if the climate changes. There is no doubt that it is changing. It was changing at the time for the whole history, and the last decades are not exception. Maybe you all know this curve, ice hockey curve, which is representing the development of mean year temperatures in the last several centuries, maybe 1,000 years. Many scientists, and after them the politicians, green politicians, are stating that in the past the temperatures were a little bit lower, and since probably 1900 they are increasing very rapidly. In the same trend, we can observe also for the development or for the dynamics of the CO2 concentration in atmosphere. So-called pre-industrial state, and since the half of 18th century increase to the current situation. And result should be simple. Especially the human-produced CO2 is responsible for the changes of climate. We have to do all the things to mitigate these trends. This is very often a statement of many scientists, or some scientists and many politicians. But there are another group of scientists who say the opposite. The first is the change of temperature followed by the change of CO2 concentrations. It's very simple because the biggest reservoir for CO2 is the ocean water. So any change of its mean temperature means big shifts or the big fluxes of CO2 in the biosphere. Look a little bit more into history. The upper graph we can omit because it is showing the temperature changes during last million of years. That means the different minus or minima and maxima means the ice ages and interglacials. More interesting for us is the medium graph, showing the probable development of mean global temperature of our planet since the end of the last ice age. The temperatures were a little bit lower, several degrees, then followed by some increase, some 8,000 years before Christ, and then again with some low decrease. And this was the proper end of the last ice age. Then we can follow the increase of temperature 1, 2, 3 degrees above the today level, followed by, let's say, changes, minus and plus. In this time developed the current forest vegetation in Europe, in our country too. So we can follow with grace palindrograms, the coming of different tree species, installation in our forests, and development of our forest ecosystems. Even more interesting is the lower graph, showing, sorry for the Czech text, but I think the time scale is visible, and the rest I will try to explain, showing the development of temperatures in the last 1,000 years, in the last millennium. And we can see that at the beginning of this period, where the temperatures several 1, 2 degrees, it is supposed higher comparing to today's status. In Scandinavia, some scientists say 4 degrees above today's level. Then followed by decrease at the beginning of 14th century. And followed even more by the small ice age, finishing somewhere at the year 1900. What is interesting, what are showing some historians, that always in the history, the global warming means global flourishing of civilizations, and global cooling, global collapse of civilizations. So in the history, the warming of the biosphere was connected with development of agriculture, development of cultures, and new kingdoms, new civilizations. Globally, not only in Europe. In Europe, we can tell a few examples. Around the year 1000, it was the colonization in the Nordic countries of Iceland, Greenland, Northern America. The grape was cultivated in Baltic region. The Teutonic Knights were cultivating the grape and drinking it. In the Czech country also, around the year 1000 came grape to the Czech country, installed and to be very successful, cultivated there for centuries. It was the type of introduction of chestnut, of many Mediterranean herbs in the monasteries by monks. And then came the collapse. First of all in the Eastern Asia, followed by the collapse in Central Asia. The Black Death, the pest came in Europe, connected with changes of temperature and climate. And several centuries, the climate was cooler and not so favorable like today. The bottom of the curve, it is the time of the 30 Years' War in the Europe. So the history and climate was always very closely connected. And just imagine this, the situation not so far. The year 1900, the rivers in Czech country were regularly frozen. The Vltava in Prague was frozen. The Thames in London too, regularly frozen to this time. And since this time, we can observe the continuous, sometimes faster, sometimes not so fast, warming. So few, let's say, we can say conclusions. In the history, I repeat, always the global warming was connected with global development of human culture. On the contrary, the global cooling collapse. For us, for foresters, by the way, the period with highest temperatures in the let's say medieval time is not called the disaster, but the historians, they call it medieval climatic optimum. The same, the highest temperatures in the Neolith is called climatic optimum, not the time of global problems. And second thing, all these changes survived our forests without big problems, or the people, they didn't recognize the problems in the forests. But today is something different, I think. Because all the problems in the biosphere in the past were solved, we can say, ecologically. It's a funny word in this context, but we can say, yes, the biosphere has some ecological equilibrium, and there were two processes which enabled to contain some balance. Emigration of people from the problematic regions to another, and extinction of the whole cultures, the whole civilizations. But today, because of globalization of everything, this is not acceptable more. I'm sure, and I think for majority of us, there is no space to emigrate, and we don't agree with extinction the whole nations in problematic regions. On the contrary, we are exhausting our resources too much, not use them sustainably, destroying water resources, destroying the soil, destroying the forests. The global deforestation is still true. Not in all countries, but there are parts of the world where it represents big problems. So this is different from the past centuries when we solved the problems in Europe in different ways. This was also reflected by the forestry, and this I am returning to the first slide and to the idea that we are under the pressure, because as we can look at the last two rows, so there is strong meaning of politicians and part of the scientific community that foresters are not able to accept this new situation in the biosphere, and that we foresters, we need a strong restrictions, regulations, and supervision. But despite this, the paradigms or ideas, the leading ideas in forestry developed in the history. At the beginning, the free access to the forest was the normal approach until, let's say, early Middle Age, when here in Europe there was a surplus of forest area. The forest was area not for protection, not for getting timber, but to convert the land into agricultural land, to build new villages, to new cities, for urbanization, for converting the land use into agricultural land. But very early, in the top or medium, middle age, the situation had to be changed because these resources were exhausted even in Europe, even in Central Europe, not only in the Western Europe. And the new approach we can call conservation. In Czech Republic or in the Central Europe, in Czech Kingdom, in fact, in this time, the reflection was codified by Maestas Carolina, by the German Roman Emperor and Czech King Charles IV, which was putting very strong regulations on the use of forest, not cutting the living trees, not burning the forest lands. Who will use the fire for destruction of forest will be killed by the fire, so burnt. So very strong, and it was, I think it was adapted in many other countries when the landlords, kings, dukes were posing very hard restrictions on the use of forest. But still, the wood, the timber, the main source for development of new urban civilizations, even in the time of the small ice age. The culture, the society needed a big resource of wood, of timber. So the modern industry originated. It was formulated the rule or the concept of sustainability. 3 years ago, we celebrating 300 years of this formulation by the German forester and economist Hans Karl von Karlowitz. This was the beginning of the, we can call it modern forestry. On one way, the even age forestry adapted in majority of cases in Central Europe, or the selective forestry adapted in majority in the border France, Switzerland, Germany. Then, because especially in the Central Europe, it was based on the even age coniferous monocultures, the foresters saw some problems. So there was formulated the concept of close to nature forestry, more diversified in age, structure, species composition. Today, especially in some countries, when the economic position of forestry is not so strong, the concept of ecosystem services is the prevailing one. So this all we can understand as a development of main concepts in the forestry. Today, we are under the pressure, under the statement that foresters are not able to understand the last changes, and from this, I believe, are coming the danger. But are there some opportunities? Yes. We have to convince the society that wood and timber is not only our product to be economically living, to survive economically, but is the best renewable resources we can produce. It's environmental friendly. In our press, we can see some statement of some ecologists that we have to replace the unecological for a wood or timber with some more ecological materials like steel, glass in construction and so on. For us, nonsense. The use of wood is energy saving in the whole society, and forests are necessary for the maintaining of landscape and for a healthy life of the society. This is generally accepted. What is not generally accepted, that foresters are able to assure this and convince the society that we are able to do is our main opportunity, including some silviculture possibilities. We have in any case, we have to increase the flexibility, the plasticity of our forest by the more diversified age, space, and species structure. The study of history can help us a lot in the discussion to bringing new arguments. Maybe you all know the right picture. It's common in European countries. Today is presented as an ideal broadleaf forest, oak copies, old copies, ecologically stable, ecological and biodiversity, the best what we can do, but it's totally human product. The natural product is the left one. Despite these two pictures is from the Far East, from Russia. The natural mixed forest with dominant conifers, and after 2 centuries of human presence, the oak coppices. And maybe the same happened here in Central, maybe in the whole Europe, because we don't know, in fact, the composition of the forest 8,000 years before Christ. And at the end, just very nice sentences of Friedrich Schiller from the end of 18th century. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Philip. You already have questions. Yes, sir. The microphone is over.
So, microphone. Yes, thank you very much for your presentation, very optimistic presentation. That maybe for your country, for Baltic, for Scandinavia, but for Spain, for Italy, for Greece, maybe not so optimistic, because not CO2, not carbon, only not temperature, the moisture very important factor. What happens is climate change is moisture.
Mm-hmm. But there is a quite strong relation between, let's say, forest share of the territory and or deforestation and humidity. And I think in Mediterranean countries could be much more true than here in Central Europe, I think in our country. I think the forests, the old forests or the newly established forests in these countries are very vital to maintain the water in the landscape. The same is in our country. We are the whole society, the politicians are solving the climatic change and forestry, but not the climatic changes and agriculture. And agriculture is, let's say, destroying the water cycle in the landscape much more efficiently comparing to forestry. We are criticized that we replaced broadleaves by conifers, and that is crime. But the compaction of soil in our country, creating large, let's say, monocultures of agriculture crops, the dehumidification of soil, use of techniques lowering the content of organic matter in the soil. This is not crime. There is always some good business between environment and agriculturists, and foresters are victims.
Thank you. Jean-Paul, tu veux dire un mot parce que spécialiste, you're an expert in forestry.
I was prepared to distribute.
I think you want to say something?
Well,
I'm sure you do.
as a forester, I can thank our past chairman for his very good intervention and historical intervention. Of course, we French consider that Mr. von Karlowitz is not the one who discovered sustainable forestry. In the 14th century, we had a king who asked his foresters to manage his forest, it was the forest of the king, in a sustainable way in perpetuity. So then we can also quote the Venetian Doge, the Venetian people, who in the 16th century developed management plans on a sustainable yield. So sustainable forestry in Europe has long
was demanded much earlier.
And then I will say that the problem of forest managers today is to get the forest ecosystem services paid by society. Forestry management, forest management as a cost. And as long as this cost is not covered by revenues, by incomes, there is no sustainable forestry possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa would like the microphone, if you would, Jean-Paul. And that will close the discussion because we have to leave at 5:30. We're almost on time. Take your time.
Thank you very much. Just a short question. Since we live under the climate change today, we also know that we are heading for something we call bioeconomy. And the demands for trees, the demands for forests will increase more and more in the future. And in order to be able to replace the fossil fuels with green fuels or raw material for other things, we need, to manage the forest in a way that they produce the most and that we can use it in different ways. So how are you thinking in the Czech Republic today about the utilization of the forest for sequestering carbon and also to be able to increase bioeconomy by your own forest?
The situation is, of course, very hard in the current policy situation because forestry sector represents some 0.4 of the GDP, or 0.1 or 0.8 of the GDP, so maybe 1%. The pure forestry sector. The employment of the forestry sector is 0.4 of the labor. So that's 10 times less than the magic 4%. So it is not so important. On the contrary, the area of forested land is increasing. Now not so fast, but it's increasing. The stocking value or stocking amount, stocking volume is increasing too. So to this moment and for the next few decades, maybe it will be net how to say, what's the sink for carbon. So this is maybe it should be written, it should be heard everywhere, but it is not. We are trying present this not only for specialists, for colleagues from agriculture and forestry sector, also in public media. It's very hard to present forestry as a thing which can solve some problems with CO2, with water resources protection, with soil protection, erosion protection. Floods, big issue now in Czech country because we had several very hard, including Prague. But the minister of environment was during this flood stating that if we have beech forests in the mountains instead of spruce forests, no floods. It's nonsense.
Thank you. Thank you. So that closes almost the meeting. I have to make an adjournment. Before we do that, I would like to thank Christine particularly for taking care of the video. So it's been videoed online, and you may.
You should go live on Friday.
I'm not sure. On Friday?
Yeah, or maybe Thursday.
Okay, so you could probably re-watch it if you wish on the website of the French Academy d'Agriculture de France, correct? Thanks, Christine, for taking care of that. Before we adjourn, I just recall to you that tomorrow morning we start early. The desk will be open at 8:15, and we very much wish to start at 8:45 sharp. And I wish you a good evening. And before we do that, also I have to say that the next GA meeting, which is now closed at 5:30 for a minutes, I guess. The next one will be in Italy with the Campiero Maracchi, who will convene us in Italy in 2018. So that's next General Assembly. Thank you very much. Have a good evening and see you tomorrow.